The radio crackled with static at 3:47 hours, cutting through the pre-dawn silence of forward operating base Kestrel like a knife through silk. Staff Sergeant Martinez pressed his headset closer to his ear, straining to make sense of the transmission bleeding through layers of interference. What he heard made no sense. An unidentified aircraft was approaching their coordinates, not the promised F-35 Lightning II that SEAL Team 6 had been waiting for, but something else entirely. Something that shouldn't exist. Tower, this is Ghost Rider requesting immediate clearance for emergency landing. I have precious cargo and we're running on fumes. The voice was calm, professional, distinctly female. Martinez frowned, cross-referencing his flight manifest. No Ghost Rider on the books. No female pilots scheduled for this operation. The mysterious aircraft wasn't responding to IFF interrogation, its transponder either damaged or deliberately disabled. Lieutenant Commander Jake "Torch" Morrison stood in the operations bunker, arms crossed, jaw tight with frustration. His team had been inserted behind enemy lines for 72 hours, gathering intelligence on a high-value target. The extraction window was closing fast, and their ride home, a state-of-the-art F-35 with stealth capabilities, was nowhere to be found. Instead, some rogue pilot was requesting permission to land at their classified location. "Negative, Ghost Rider," Martinez responded curtly. "This is restricted airspace. Identify yourself and state your clearance codes." The response sent chills down his spine. "Tower, I don't have clearance codes, but I've got 6 of your boys in the back who need medical attention, and if you don't clear me to land in the next 90 seconds, they're going to bleed out over this desert." Through his night vision scope, Morrison caught the first glimpse of the aircraft emerging from the darkness. His breath caught in his throat. It wasn't an F-35. It wasn't even close to modern. The silhouette cutting through the star-filled sky belonged to an F-4 Phantom II, a Vietnam-era fighter that should have been in a museum, not conducting combat operations. The twin-engine beast moved with surprising grace despite its age, but something was wrong, terribly wrong. The tail section was mangled beyond recognition, chunks of metal missing where the vertical stabilizer should have been. Hydraulic fluid leaked in dark streams from the fuselage, and one engine was clearly running rough, belching intermittent flames. Yet somehow, impossibly, the ancient warbird maintained steady flight. Morrison had seen enough combat to recognize a miracle when it stared him in the face. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "Martinez, clear her to land now." The tower operator hesitated. "Sir, we don't know who." "I said clear her to land." Morrison's voice carried the authority of a man who'd lost too many good soldiers to bureaucratic hesitation. Something told him this Ghost Rider, whoever she was, had already paid a price higher than any clearance code could validate. The F-4 Phantom touched down hard on the makeshift runway, its damaged landing gear screaming against the packed earth. Sparks flew as metal scraped against stone, the aircraft's weight settling unevenly on compromised struts. The twin J-79 engines wound down with mechanical groans that spoke of systems pushed far beyond their design limits. Even at rest, the ancient fighter seemed to tremble, held together by willpower and prayer. Morrison jogged toward the aircraft, his tactical team flanking him with weapons ready but lowered. Protocol demanded caution, but instinct told him this pilot, whoever she was, had just performed the impossible. The Phantom's canopy cracked open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a figure in a flight suit that had seen better decades. The helmet came off first, releasing a cascade of auburn hair that caught the base's floodlights like copper wire. Captain Vera "Ghost" Kowalski dropped to the tarmac with the fluid grace of someone who'd made 1,000 such exits, though her legs betrayed a slight tremor from adrenaline and exhaustion. She was smaller than Morrison had expected, maybe 5'6" in flight boots, but there was something in her green eyes that commanded immediate respect. Combat veterans recognized their own, regardless of gender or aircraft vintage. "Where are my wounded?" Morrison called out, approaching with his medics in tow. Ghost gestured toward the Phantom's rear cockpit. 2 KIA, 4 wounded. The worst case is Petty Officer Collins, took shrapnel to the femoral artery. I've had pressure on it for 40 minutes, but he's lost a lot of blood. Her voice remained steady, clinical, but Morrison caught the slight catch when she mentioned the dead. Every pilot knew that tone. It meant she'd carried those bodies through hell to bring them home. The rescue had been a nightmare. Ghost's original mission was reconnaissance, a simple photo run over suspected enemy positions using the Phantom's ancient but reliable camera systems. The F-4 might have been obsolete by modern standards, but it could still fly lower and slower than most contemporary aircraft, making it perfect for detailed surveillance work that satellites couldn't provide. She'd been heading home when she spotted the crashed helicopter. The SEAL team's transport had taken a direct hit from a shoulder-fired missile, going down in a valley that was rapidly filling with hostile forces. By all military logic, Ghost should have called in the coordinates and continued her mission. The rules of engagement were clear. Reconnaissance assets don't conduct combat search and rescue. But rules were written by people who'd never seen good soldiers dying in enemy territory while help flew overhead. Ghost had put the Phantom into a dive that would have impressed her Vietnam-era predecessors, strafing enemy positions with the aircraft's internal cannon, while her backseater, Lieutenant Marcus, Wizard Chen, worked the radio to coordinate the pickup. The extraction had cost them. A surface-to-air missile had clipped the Phantom's tail, destroying most of the vertical stabilizer and damaging the rear engine. Hydraulics were failing, flight controls were barely responsive, and they were leaking fuel from punctured tanks. But somehow, Ghost had nursed the crippled fighter across 200 miles of hostile territory, carrying 6 wounded SEALs in a cockpit designed for 2. Morrison watched his medics work on the casualties, professional admiration mixing with disbelief. How the hell did you keep this thing in the air? Ghost shrugged, exhaustion finally showing in her shoulders. Same way you keep anything flying. You don't let it quit until you're ready to. The debrief took place in a windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and dried sweat. Morrison sat across from Ghost, studying her service record with growing amazement. Captain Vera Kowalski, call sign Ghost, 34 years old, 15 years of service, combat tour in 3 different theaters. She'd flown everything from close air support to deep reconnaissance, accumulating decorations that read like a recruitment poster. Yet somehow, she'd been relegated to flying museum pieces on glorified photography missions. Says here you were supposed to transition to F-35s 2 years ago, Morrison noted, scanning the file. What happened? Ghost's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Politics. Some people in the Pentagon think women belong in trainers and transports, not frontline fighters. They found creative ways to delay my certification. She paused, choosing her words carefully. The F-4 wasn't my first choice, but it's what they gave me. I learned to make it work. The politics made Morrison's stomach turn. He'd seen too many qualified personnel sidelined because they didn't fit someone's narrow definition of a warrior. But looking at Ghost now, watching her methodically clean her flight gloves while her eyes remained alert and focused, he saw something the desk jockeys had missed. They'd tried to clip her wings and had instead created something far more dangerous, a pilot with nothing to prove except that she belonged in the sky. Your backseater, Morrison said. Chen, how'd he handle the mission? Wizard solid, green as grass when we started, but he kept his head when things went sideways. Managed the weapons systems, coordinated with your boys on the ground, never once complained about the ride. Ghost's voice carried genuine respect. Kid's got potential if the Air Force doesn't waste it. Lieutenant Chen had indeed proven himself during the harrowing rescue. Fresh from flight school, he'd been assigned to Ghost more as punishment than promotion. Nobody wanted to fly with the woman pilot who couldn't get modern equipment. But when the missiles started flying, Chen had demonstrated the calm professionalism that separated real warriors from parade ground soldiers. The rescue itself had been a masterclass in improvisation. With the helicopter down and enemy forces converging, Ghost had used the Phantom's speed and maneuverability to create a defensive perimeter around the crash site. She'd made multiple strafing runs, each one bringing her closer to the effective range of enemy anti-aircraft weapons, buying precious minutes for the SEALs to prepare their wounded for extraction. The pickup had required landing on a stretch of desert road barely wide enough for the Phantom's wingspan. With Chen calling out clearances and watching for obstacles, Ghost had brought the heavy fighter down in a controlled crash that would have killed a lesser pilot. They'd loaded the casualties in 90 seconds, the wounded crammed into any available space, the dead strapped to external hardpoints with parachute cord. Taking off had been even more challenging. Overloaded and damaged, the Phantom had used every inch of available road to build enough speed for liftoff. An enemy RPG had detonated just meters behind the aircraft as it cleared the ground, the shockwave helping to push them into the sky even as shrapnel shredded the tail section. Morrison closed the file, his decision already made. "I'm recommending you for the Silver Star. That rescue was above and beyond any reasonable." "No," Ghost's interruption was quiet but firm. "I don't want medals for doing my job. Save the paperwork for someone who needs the recognition." She stood, straightening her flight suit with practiced efficiency. "Is there anything else, Commander? I need to check on my aircraft." The maintenance hangar buzzed with activity as Ghost surveyed the damage to her F-4 Phantom. Chief Master Sergeant Rosa Tank Delgado, a woman whose reputation for mechanical miracles preceded her, ran weathered hands along the fighter's wounded fuselage like a doctor examining a patient. The prognosis wasn't good. "She's held together by stubbornness and luck, ma'am," Tank reported, her voice carrying the blunt honesty that came with 30 years of keeping aircraft airworthy. "The tail's shot to hell, hydraulics are compromised, and I count at least 47 separate holes in the fuselage. By all rights, this bird should have fallen out of the sky an hour ago." Ghost nodded, unsurprised. She'd felt every vibration, heard every mechanical protest during the flight home. The Phantom had given everything it had to complete the mission, and now it would need weeks of work to fly again, if it ever could. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd saved 6 lives in an aircraft that most people considered obsolete, proving that capability mattered more than technology. Lieutenant Chen approached from across the hangar, his young face still pale from their ordeal. "Ma'am, I wanted to thank you for—" "For what, wizard?" Ghost interrupted gently. "You did your job back there. Weapons systems, communications, navigation, everything worked because you made it work. Don't thank me for giving you the chance to prove yourself." The compliment meant more to Chen than any medal could. He joined the Air Force dreaming of high-tech fighters and glory missions, only to find himself assigned to an aging F-4 with a pilot nobody wanted to fly with. But today had changed his perspective. He'd learned that honor wasn't found in the sophistication of your equipment, but in your willingness to risk everything for others. Tank continued her assessment, occasionally whistling at particularly impressive damage. The chief had seen combat aircraft before and after countless missions, but the Phantom's condition defied explanation. Multiple systems should have failed catastrophically, yet somehow the ancient fighter had continued functioning long enough to complete its impossible rescue. "You know what I think," Tank said finally, straightening up and wiping hydraulic fluid from her hands. "I think this old bird knew what she was carrying. Sometimes aircraft get a soul of their own, and today this one decided 6 SEALs were worth dying for." Ghost smiled at the anthropomorphism, but didn't dismiss it entirely. Pilots developed relationships with their aircraft that mechanics understood better than anyone. The F-4 had been her partner for 2 years, absorbing her frustrations and channeling her skills. Perhaps Tank was right. Perhaps the machine had found its own form of honor in that desperate flight across hostile territory. Word of the rescue was already spreading through the base. Personnel found excuses to walk past the hangar, catching glimpses of the damaged Phantom and the quiet woman who'd flown it home. The story grew with each telling. the female pilot nobody wanted, flying a fighter nobody respected, pulling off a rescue that would enter military legend. Morrison appeared at Ghost's shoulder, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about what you said, about not wanting recognition for doing your job." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes the job requires recognition, not for you but for everyone else who needs to understand what's possible." Ghost considered this, her eyes never leaving the Phantom's scarred metal skin. Recognition meant attention, and attention brought scrutiny she'd spent her career avoiding. But Morrison had a point. Somewhere, another female pilot might be fighting the same battles Ghost had faced, wondering if she belonged in the cockpit of a fighter aircraft. The Pentagon briefing room fell silent as the slides changed, displaying high-resolution photographs of Ghost's damaged F-4 Phantom. General Patricia "Iron Eagle" Rodriguez, one of the few women to reach flag rank in the Air Force, studied the images with professional interest. The rescue mission had generated reports that defied belief, requiring her personal attention to separate fact from fiction. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd fought for every star on her collar, "we have a situation that demands careful consideration. Captain Kowalski's actions yesterday represent either exceptional heroism or dangerous insubordination, depending on your perspective." Colonel James "Hawk" Patterson, a career fighter pilot with traditionalist views, cleared his throat. "General, with all due respect, Captain Kowalski violated multiple protocols. Reconnaissance aircraft aren't authorized for combat search and rescue. She endangered herself, her backseater, and a valuable asset for what amounts to grandstanding." Rodriguez fixed Patterson with a stare that had withered lesser men. "Colonel, 6 Navy SEALs are alive today because Captain Kowalski chose action over protocol. Are you suggesting she should have followed regulations and watched them die?" The question hung in the air like smoke from an aircraft crash. Patterson shifted uncomfortably, aware that his answer would define his character in front of peers who'd made similar life-or-death decisions. The military walked a constant tightrope between following orders and doing what was right, and sometimes those two imperatives conflicted catastrophically. Captain Sarah "Viper" Williams, one of the few female fighter pilots in the briefing, spoke up. "Ma'am, if I may, Captain Kowalski's record shows consistent excellence despite being denied advanced aircraft assignments. Perhaps we should ask why such a qualified pilot was relegated to reconnaissance duties in obsolete equipment." The observation struck at the heart of an uncomfortable truth. Ghost's career had been systematically stalled by a combination of conscious bias and institutional inertia. Officers who should have recognized her potential had instead found reasons to question her judgment, her temperament, her suitability for advanced roles. The result was a pilot of exceptional skill trapped in assignments that wasted her talents. General Rodriguez had seen this pattern before. The military's integration of women into combat roles had been marked by progress and setbacks, victories and quiet defeats. Some barriers had fallen through legislation and litigation, but others persisted in the form of subtle discrimination that was harder to identify and impossible to prosecute. "The question before us," Rodriguez continued, "is not whether Captain Kowalski broke rules. She clearly did. The question is whether those rules served the mission and the men she saved." She clicked to the next slide, showing the rescued SEALs in the base hospital. "These sailors are alive because a pilot in an obsolete aircraft chose courage over compliance." The discussion that followed revealed the complex dynamics that shaped military careers. Some officers argued that discipline required absolute adherence to established procedures, regardless of circumstances. Others contended that rigid rule-following produced robot officers who couldn't adapt when situations demanded creative solutions. Patterson made one final attempt to salvage his position. "General, if we reward this behavior, what message does that send about chain of command and military discipline?" Rodriguez smiled grimly. Colonel, the message it sends is that we value results over regulations, lives over liability, and courage over conformity. Those have always been Air Force values, even when we forgot to practice them. She closed the briefing folder with finality. Captain Kowalski will receive the Distinguished Flying Cross. Her backseater will be recommended for promotion. And I want a full review of pilot assignments to ensure we're not wasting talent due to institutional prejudice. The room erupted in quiet conversations as officers processed the implications. Some saw vindication for pilots who'd been marginalized or overlooked. Others worried about the precedent of rewarding insubordination, regardless of outcome. 3 days later, Ghost stood in the base commander's office, her dress blue uniform bearing ribbons that told the story of a career spent proving herself repeatedly. Colonel Marcus Stone, Brennan, the base commander, reviewed her orders with the expression of someone who'd received guidance from very high levels of command. Captain Kowalski, he began formally, you're being transferred to Nellis Air Force Base for immediate transition training to F-35 Lightning II aircraft. Following completion of that program, you'll be assigned to the 421st Fighter Squadron as a flight leader. He looked up from the papers, his expression softening slightly. It's a promotion that should have happened years ago. Ghost accepted the orders without visible emotion, though Brennan caught the slight relaxation in her shoulders. After years of flying hand-me-down aircraft and accepting assignments that didn't match her capabilities, she was finally getting a chance to prove herself in modern equipment. The vindication felt hollow after so long, but it was vindication nonetheless. There's one more thing, Brennan continued. General Rodriguez wants to see you before you transfer, something about a special assignment that requires your particular skills. He paused, studying Ghost's face for reaction. Word is, they're putting together a unit for unconventional operations, pilots who can think outside the box and adapt to impossible situations. The prospect intrigued Ghost more than the promotion. Special assignments usually meant challenging missions that regular units couldn't or wouldn't handle. After years of routine reconnaissance flights, the idea of work that pushed her abilities appealed to the pilot who'd just proven she could perform miracles in obsolete equipment. Lieutenant Chen knocked on the office door, entering with the slightly nervous energy of someone still processing recent events. His promotion to captain had been fast-tracked, recognizing both his performance during the rescue and the need to retain promising young officers. He'd also been assigned to follow Ghost to Nellis, continuing their partnership in more advanced aircraft. Ma'am, he addressed Ghost, I wanted to thank you again for. Wizard, Ghost interrupted with a slight smile, if you keep thanking me, I'm going to start charging fees. You earned your place on that mission. Don't let anyone tell you differently. The exchange illustrated something that military leadership courses rarely addressed: the way exceptional missions created bonds between crew members that transcended rank and protocol. Ghost and Chen had shared an experience that would connect them for the rest of their careers, having seen each other's character under the ultimate pressure. Tank appeared in the doorway, her coveralls still stained with hydraulic fluid from the Phantom repair efforts. Captain, thought you'd want to know, your bird's going to pull through. It'll take 6 weeks and half the spare parts inventory, but she'll fly again. Ghost nodded, pleased but not surprised. The F-4 had proven as stubborn as its pilot, refusing to accept defeat even when logic suggested surrender. In a few months, another crew would take the restored Phantom on reconnaissance missions, probably never knowing the story of its finest hour. What happens to aircraft like that? Chen asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. When they're too old for frontline service but too valuable to scrap. They keep flying, Tank replied with the certainty of someone who'd seen aircraft outlive their supposed lifespans by decades. Different missions, different crews, but the same job, taking people up and bringing them home. That's what they're built for. The comment resonated with Ghost, who'd spent her career in aircraft that others considered outdated or inappropriate. Perhaps the real measure of a pilot wasn't the sophistication of her equipment, but her ability to accomplish the mission regardless of limitations. The flight to Nellie's Air Force Base gave Ghost time to reflect on the events that had changed her career trajectory in a single afternoon. The F-35 Lightning II that carried her westward represented everything the F-4 Phantom wasn't: modern, stealthy, packed with sensors and weapon systems that would have seemed like science fiction to Vietnam-era pilots. Yet she found herself missing the honest simplicity of the older aircraft. Captain Rodriguez, the general's daughter and a skilled pilot in her own right, occupied the front seat, using the cross-country flight as an opportunity to evaluate Ghost's flying skills firsthand. The younger Rodriguez had requested the assignment, curious about the pilot whose rescue mission had captured her mother's attention and imagination. "So tell me about the Phantom," Rodriguez said over the intercom, her voice professionally neutral but carrying undertones of genuine interest. "Most pilots your age never flew anything that old. What's it like?" Ghost considered the question while monitoring the F-35's automated systems. "It's like driving a muscle car instead of a computer. Everything you do has immediate physical consequences. The engines respond to throttle inputs, the controls give you feedback through the stick, and when something breaks, you can usually feel it happening." She paused, organizing her thoughts. "Modern aircraft are more capable, but older ones teach you to fly by instinct." The comparison revealed a philosophy that separated pilot generations. Younger aviators had grown up with digital flight controls, automated systems, and computer-assisted decision-making. They flew by numbers displayed on screens, trusting sensors and software to interpret the world around them. Ghost's generation had learned to read the sky through the seat of their pants, developing intuitive understanding that supplemented technological capability. Rodriguez pushed the Lightning II through a series of tactical maneuvers, testing both the aircraft's capabilities and Ghost's reactions to unfamiliar flight characteristics. The F-35 responded to control inputs with clinical precision, its fly-by-wire systems translating pilot intentions into optimal aircraft behavior. It was impressive and slightly unsettling, like being a passenger in your own airplane. "My mother says you turned down the Silver Star," Rodriguez mentioned casually, executing a climbing turn that would have been impossible in the damaged Phantom. "Why?" "Because medals are supposed to recognize exceptional behavior," Ghost replied. "Saving those SEALs wasn't exceptional, it was necessary. Any pilot worth the wings on their chest would have done the same thing." Rodriguez smiled at the response, recognizing the humility that often characterized the best pilots. Her mother had described similar attitudes among combat veterans who viewed extraordinary actions as ordinary duty. It was a mindset that created legends and frustrated public relations officers in equal measure. The conversation drifted to technical topics as they continued westward, both pilots sharing observations about aircraft performance and tactical applications. Ghost found Rodriguez knowledgeable and unpretentious, lacking the arrogance that sometimes infected pilots from prominent military families. The younger woman had clearly earned her position through competence rather than connections. As the Nevada landscape unfolded below them, Ghost felt a familiar mixture of anticipation and apprehension. New assignments meant new challenges, new opportunities to prove herself, and new ways to fail if she couldn't adapt quickly enough. But after years of flying obsolete equipment in routine missions, the prospect of real challenges felt like liberation. Nellie's Air Force Base sprawled across the Nevada desert like a metallic oasis, its runways and hangars shimmering in the afternoon heat. Ghost had been here before for training exercises, but never as a permanent assignment. The base hosted some of the Air Force's most advanced units, including the Thunderbirds demonstration team and various experimental programs that pushed the boundaries of aviation technology. General Rodriguez waited in the base operations center, her presence commanding immediate attention from everyone in the room. At 62, She retained the erect bearing and sharp eyes that had made her reputation as both pilot and commander. Her career had paralleled the Air Force's gradual acceptance of women in combat roles, and she bore the scars of battles fought in conference rooms as well as cockpits. "Captain Kowalski," she began without preamble, "your rescue mission created ripples that reached the highest levels of Pentagon leadership. Some people are calling it the most significant single aircraft rescue since the Vietnam War." She paused, studying Ghost's reaction. "Others are saying it was a dangerous precedent that undermines military discipline. I'm more interested in what you learned from the experience." Ghost took a moment to formulate her response, aware that her answer would influence whatever assignment Rodriguez had in mind. "Ma'am, I learned that capability matters more than credentials, results matter more than regulations, and sometimes the best equipment for a mission isn't the newest or most expensive." The answer satisfied Rodriguez, who'd reached similar conclusions during her own career. Too many officers became obsessed with technological solutions to tactical problems, forgetting that wars were still fought by people who had to make split-second decisions under impossible circumstances. The military needed pilots who could adapt, improvise, and succeed regardless of what they were flying. "I'm forming a new unit," Rodriguez continued, her voice carrying the weight of classified knowledge. "Officially, it's called the 99th Special Operations Squadron. Unofficially, we call it the Ghost Riders, which makes your call sign particularly appropriate." She smiled at the coincidence. "Our mission is to provide aviation support for operations that don't fit standard parameters. Unconventional warfare, special reconnaissance, personnel recovery in denied areas. The kind of work that requires pilots who can think creatively." The assignment excited Ghost more than the F-35 transition training. Special operations meant challenging missions, elite teammates, and the chance to use her skills in ways that regular assignments didn't permit. It also meant higher risks and greater responsibility, but she'd spent her career preparing for exactly this kind of opportunity. "The unit will operate a mixed aircraft inventory," Rodriguez explained. "F-35s for missions requiring stealth, F-16s for close air support, and yes, even some F-4 Phantoms for situations where older aircraft provide tactical advantages." She noted Ghost's surprise with approval. "Your rescue mission proved that obsolete doesn't mean useless. Sometimes the best tool for a job is the one nobody expects you to use." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the office door. A tall, lanky pilot entered with the casual confidence that marked veteran special operations personnel. Major David Reaper Sullivan had the weathered face of someone who'd spent 20 years flying in places that didn't appear on maps, conducting missions that didn't appear in official records. "General Captain Kowalski," Sullivan nodded to each in turn. "I wanted to welcome you to the unit personally, ma'am. Word of your Phantom rescue has already made the rounds among the special ops community. That kind of flying gets noticed." Ghost appreciated the straightforward welcome, recognizing in Sullivan the type of professional she'd always preferred working with. Special operations attracted pilots who valued competence over politics, results over recognition. It was an environment where her skills would be evaluated fairly and her gender would be irrelevant. The 99th Special Operations Squadron occupied a cluster of hangars on the remote side of Nellis, away from the base's main flight operations. The unit's aircraft inventory reflected its unconventional mission: sleek F-35s parked beside rugged A-10 Warthogs, with vintage F-4 Phantoms completing the collection. Each aircraft served specific tactical niches that modern multi-role fighters couldn't fill as effectively. Ghost spent her first week familiarizing herself with the unit's capabilities and personnel. The pilot roster read like a collection of misfits and legends, officers who'd been too aggressive for regular squadrons, too innovative for traditional commands, or too skilled to waste in routine assignments. They shared a common characteristic: the ability to accomplish impossible missions through superior flying and creative thinking. Captain Alina Voodoo, Restrepo had flown close air support in 3 different wars, earning a reputation for precision strikes in situations where collateral damage wasn't acceptable. Her A-10 Warthog bore artwork that celebrated both her Colombian heritage and her talent for making problems disappear with 30 cannon fire. Major Kenneth "Icebox" Thompson piloted an F-16 Fighting Falcon that he'd modified with additional fuel tanks and specialized sensors for deep reconnaissance missions. His call sign referenced both his unflappable demeanor under fire and his ability to operate in Arctic conditions that grounded other aircraft. The unit's maintainers were equally exceptional, led by Chief Master Sergeant Tank Delgado, who transferred from Ghost's previous base specifically to keep the mixed aircraft fleet operational. Tank's reputation for mechanical miracles had earned her a place in a unit that regularly pushed equipment beyond manufacturer specifications. "Welcome to the island of misfit toys," Sullivan told Ghost as they toured the maintenance bays. "Everyone here got assigned because they didn't fit somewhere else. Too aggressive, too independent, too willing to color outside the lines. Command figured if they stuck us all together, we'd either kill each other or become the most effective unit in the Air Force." Ghost studied the aircraft being serviced around them, noting the non-standard modifications and equipment that marked special operations aircraft. External fuel tanks, additional communication antennas, specialized defensive systems, everything designed to extend range, improve survivability, or enhance mission capability in ways that standard aircraft couldn't match. "What makes this different from regular special ops?" she asked, genuinely curious about the unit's role within the larger special operations community. "Flexibility," Sullivan replied immediately. "Most special ops units are optimized for specific mission types. We're designed to handle whatever doesn't fit established categories. Personnel recovery, deep reconnaissance, unconventional warfare support. If it's weird enough that nobody else wants to touch it, they send it to us." The explanation resonated with Ghost's experience of being assigned missions that didn't fit standard parameters. Her career had been defined by situations requiring improvisation and adaptation, making her a natural fit for a unit that institutionalized those qualities. Chen appeared from behind an F-35, his flight suit bearing the new squadron patches that marked him as one of the unit's junior pilots. His transition to special operations had been as dramatic as Ghost's, transforming him from a green lieutenant into an emerging specialist in electronic warfare and tactical reconnaissance. "Ma'am," he greeted Ghost with genuine enthusiasm, "wait until you see what they've done with these lightning eyes. The sensor packages are incredible. We can identify targets from ranges that would have been impossible in the Phantom." The comment highlighted the technological gap between aircraft generations, but Ghost remained skeptical of solutions that relied too heavily on electronic systems. Her experience had taught her that the most sophisticated equipment failed at the worst possible moments, leaving pilots to succeed or fail based on fundamental flying skills and tactical judgment. The first mission briefing took place in a secure facility that reminded Ghost of spy movies: windowless rooms, classified documents, and an atmosphere of controlled paranoia that marked operations requiring special access clearances. General Rodriguez presided over the meeting with the efficiency of someone who'd conducted similar briefings hundreds of times. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation developing in the South China Sea that requires immediate attention," she began, activating a wall-mounted display that showed satellite imagery of disputed waters. 3 days ago, a Navy reconnaissance aircraft went down approximately 200 miles southwest of Taiwan. The crew of 4 is confirmed alive and evading capture on a small uninhabited island. The tactical problem was immediately apparent to everyone in the room. The downed aircrew was located in waters claimed by multiple nations, surrounded by hostile naval forces, and beyond the range of conventional rescue assets. Standard combat search and rescue protocols were inadequate for the political and geographical complexities involved. Normal CSAR operations are complicated by the international situation, Rodriguez continued. Any large-scale rescue attempt risks escalating tensions in an already volatile region. We need something subtle, deniable, and capable of operating without extensive support infrastructure. Sullivan studied the tactical display with professional interest. Ma'am, what kind of opposition are we looking at? Surface vessels, aircraft, or both? All of the above, Rodriguez replied grimly. Intelligence indicates at least 2 destroyers in the immediate area, plus regular air patrols by both military and civilian aircraft. The rescue window is closing rapidly as enemy forces converge on the island. Ghost analyzed the mission parameters with growing understanding. This was exactly the type of operation that required unconventional thinking and flexible tactics. Standard military responses would be too heavy-handed, too obvious, or too slow to succeed within the available timeline. General, she said carefully, what kind of aircraft are we authorized to use for this mission? Rodriguez smiled at the question, recognizing Ghost's tactical thinking. That's where your recent experience becomes relevant, Captain. Sometimes the best aircraft for a mission is the one nobody expects to see in the area. The implication was clear. Civilian aircraft, or military aircraft disguised as civilian vessels, could operate in the disputed waters without immediately triggering international incidents. The 99th Squadron's mixed inventory suddenly made perfect sense as a tool for missions requiring operational deception. We'll be using a modified F-4 Phantom configured for extended-range reconnaissance, Rodriguez explained, clicking to detailed aircraft specifications. Officially, it's a civilian contractor conducting environmental monitoring. Unofficially, it's your ride to extract 4 Navy personnel before they become prisoners of war. The mission appealed to Ghost on multiple levels. It combined the flying challenges she enjoyed with the humanitarian purpose that had driven her military service. More importantly, it proved that her experience with older aircraft wasn't just nostalgic curiosity. It was a tactical asset that provided capabilities unavailable to pilots who'd only flown modern equipment. Chen raised his hand tentatively. Ma'am, what about weapons systems? If we're operating under civilian cover, we can't exactly carry missiles. Excellent question, Captain, Rodriguez responded approvingly. The mission profile emphasizes stealth and speed over firepower. Your job is to locate the survivors, extract them, and return to base without engaging hostile forces. Think of it as the ultimate test of pilot skill, accomplishing the mission through flying ability rather than advanced weapons. The mission launched at 3:30 hours under a moonless sky that provided maximum concealment for the modified F-4 Phantom. Ghost occupied the front seat, while Chen managed navigation and communications from the rear cockpit, their aircraft stripped of military markings and equipped with civilian registration numbers that would satisfy cursory inspection. The Phantom had been extensively modified for the mission, its external fuel tanks replaced with additional range tanks that extended operational radius to nearly 800 miles. Internal systems included enhanced navigation equipment, encrypted communication radios, and specialized sensors for locating personnel in maritime environments. Ghost Rider, you are.